He called the cops on a suspicious black man. But when the officers arrived, they were the ones who got the shock of their lives. It was a warm afternoon in Brookfield, Indiana, the kind where people watered their lawns, kids rode their bikes, and neighbors casually waved to each other from their porches. Howard Caldwell, 67, had lived on Sycamore Lane for nearly 4 decades. He knew every car that passed, every jogger following the usual route, and every single neighbor by name, so when he spotted a tall black man in a tailored suit standing in front of the vacant house across the street, his stomach tightened. He squinted through the window, watching the man who wasn't doing anything, just standing there, looking at the house like he was waiting for someone. But something about it didn't sit right with Howard. The house had been empty for months after the previous owner moved into a retirement home. No for sale sign. No moving trucks. Just this man standing there like he owned the place. Howard reached for his phone and hesitated. Maybe the guy was lost. Maybe he was waiting for a realtor. But maybe, just maybe, he wasn't supposed to be there at all. He dialed 911. Yeah. This is Howard Caldwell. I live over on Sycamore Lane. I'm looking out my window right now and there's a suspicious man outside the vacant house across the street, a tall black guy in a suit. I don't know what he's up to, but he's just standing there. The dispatcher asked if the man was trying to break in. Howard admitted that he wasn't. Well, no, but it just doesn't look right. This is a quiet neighborhood. We don't get strangers just hanging around. The dispatcher said they'd send an officer to check it out. Howard hung up, keeping his eyes locked on the man. Part of him wondered if he was overreacting. But another part, the part that had always believed he could tell when something was off, felt sure he'd done the right thing. 5 minutes later, the distant sound of police sirens cut through the suburban calm. 2 squad cars turned onto Sycamore Lane, slowing as they approached the house. Howard felt a flicker of relief. The officers would handle it, but something about the way the man stood, so calm and unbothered, made Howard uneasy. Most people would have looked nervous by now, maybe even tried to leave. Not this guy. He just waited. Howard didn't realize it yet, but he had just set in motion something that it would shake the entire neighborhood to its core. But the real shock was still to come. The squad cars rolled to a stop, their tires crunching against the pavement. The man in the suit didn't move. He didn't even flinch. Instead, he turned his head slightly, watching as 2 uniformed officers stepped out of their vehicles. Officer Bradley Monroe, a stocky man in his mid-40s with a habit of resting his hand on his holster, took the lead, while his younger partner, Officer Jason Whitaker, hung back slightly. Monroe's eyes flickered toward the house, then back to the man. Afternoon. Sir, mind telling us what you're doing here? The man turned to face them fully, his expression unreadable. His suit was crisp and tailored perfectly to his broad frame. If he was intimidated, he made no sign of it. Is there a problem, officer? He asked, his voice steady from across the street. Howard watched from behind his curtain, barely breathing. We got a call about a suspicious person on the property, Monroe said, glancing at the vacant house. This place has been empty for a while. We just need to know what your business is here. The man exhaled sharply through his nose, almost a chuckle. But not quite. He reached into his pocket slowly. Monroe's fingers tensed near his holster, and Whitaker took a half step forward. Howard's pulse spiked, but the man didn't pull out a weapon. Instead, he produced a leather badge holder, flipping it open with a casual flick of his wrist. The gold emblem inside caught the sunlight. My name is L. Briggs. I'm the new chief of police for this town. In that moment, the neighborhood noise, the hum of lawnmowers and the distant chatter of kids, seemed to vanish. Monroe blinked, his mouth opened slightly before he closed it again. He looked over at Whitaker, as if to make sure his partner had heard the same thing. Whitaker's face remained unreadable. Wait a minute. Monroe cleared his throat. Chief Briggs, he said. That's right. I just got here a week ago. I was planning to introduce myself at the station later today. At that, Whitaker's posture changed instantly. His hands, which had been hovering near his belt, relaxed completely. know how to do their jobs. Jared chuckled. You got it, old man. As they drove off, the luxury dealership faded into the distance. Just another place that lost more than just money that day. Because respect, that's something money can't buy. Have you ever been judged by your appearance before people even knew who you were? Or seen someone else get treated unfairly just because they didn't look the part? It happens more than we think, and the only way to change it. Call it out when we see it. Treat people with respect, not because of what they have, but because of who they are. If this story made you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Let's keep the conversation going, because at the end of the day, character matters more than status. After he walked away, Monroe exhaled, his shoulders dropping. Whitaker still hadn't spoken, but the situation was far from over. Now the whole neighborhood knew what had just happened. And they weren't going to let it go. Leonard opened his car door, slid inside, and shut it behind him with quiet finality. He didn't slam it, nor did he speed off. He just sat there for a moment, gripping the wheel and taking a breath. Meanwhile, the tension outside was suffocating. Monroe and Whitaker stood there, suddenly aware that all eyes were on them. The neighbors weren't just watching anymore, they were whispering. Murmurs passed from porch to porch, with raised eyebrows and shaking heads. A woman across the street, Denise Harper, a schoolteacher, crossed her arms and called out, "Did you really just stop the new police chief?" Monroe's jaw tightened. Howard felt his stomach drop further. Then another voice, Tom Grayson, the guy 2 doors down, shouted, "All this because a black man was standing in a suit. That's what we doing?" Now the murmurs grew louder. Whitaker shifted uncomfortably, and Monroe clenched his fists. Neither of them had an answer. Then the real blow landed, the sound of Leonard's car door opening again. He stepped out, but this time he wasn't holding his badge. He had his phone in his hand. Howard didn't have to guess what he was doing. He was making a call. Monroe's face went pale. It hit him. This wasn't just going to be a bad look. This was about to go up the chain. Howard swallowed hard. He had made one phone call thinking he was protecting his neighborhood. And now the entire community was watching him. Denise turned toward Howard's house, her eyes narrowing. She wasn't the only one. Howard backed away. A truth is real. Change starts with us. What would you have done? And if this story made you think, even for a second, don't forget to subscribe. There are more stories like this that need to be told, and we want you to be part of the conversation. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.